The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting soft shadows over a quiet suburban neighborhood. The streets were calm, the kind of peace that usually made people feel safe. But tonight the air carried a strange tension, like something unseen was waiting just around the corner. A young man walked steadily down the sidewalk, his footsteps steady and sure. He wore a crisp military uniform, the kind that spoke of discipline and duty. His name was Jason, and though he was only 18, he carried himself like someone who had already faced many challenges. Jason came from a family with a long history of service. His parents had raised him with strong values: respect, honor, and courage. The neighborhood knew the family well. They were quiet, kind people who always tried to help others. Jason had grown up here, in this very house, a modest two-story home filled with laughter, memories, and a sense of belonging. Tonight Jason was finally coming home after weeks away, serving his country and training to become a soldier. His heart was full of relief and pride, but beneath it was a quiet unease, as if the peaceful street was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Jason's footsteps slowed as he reached the driveway of his family home. His shoulders ached from carrying his bags, heavy with everything he had packed for weeks away. The day had been long, filled with drills and orders, but now all he wanted was to step inside and finally rest. But something felt off. The neighborhood didn't look the same as it had when he left. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that made the quiet seem darker than usual. The houses stood still like silent watchers, and the usual friendly faces were nowhere to be seen. The peacefulness felt empty, almost like the calm before a storm. Jason pulled his keys from his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly. He moved toward the front door, expecting to hear the familiar creak of the porch floorboards beneath his boots. But before he could even reach the handle, a sudden shout cut through the silence. "Stop right there. Put your hands where we can see them." Two police officers appeared out of nowhere, rushing toward him with urgency. Their faces were serious, voices harsh and loud. "Are you breaking in? What are you doing here?" one demanded. Jason froze, his heart pounded. "No, wait. I live here. I'm Jason, the owner's son," he tried to say, but the words felt weak against the officer's stern commands. The officers didn't listen. They stepped closer, their hands reaching for him like he was a stranger, a threat. Jason's mind raced. How could they not recognize him? His uniform, his ID, none of it seemed to matter in that moment. Confusion swirled inside him. Why were they accusing him? Why was this happening now, after everything he'd done and sacrificed? Fear crept up his spine, twisting his stomach. He felt trapped, caught between the uniform that meant honor and the harsh voices that saw only suspicion. Frustration burned bright. He wanted to scream, to explain, to prove who he was, but the officers moved faster, ignoring his protests. The night that should have welcomed him home was turning into a nightmare he never saw coming. Without warning, one of the officers grabbed Jason's arm roughly and forced his hands behind his back. The cold metal of the handcuffs snapped shut before he could even explain himself. Pain shot through his wrists, but he held his tongue, remembering everything he had been taught during his training: control, patience, calm. "Please, I'm not doing anything wrong," Jason said, his voice steady but strained. "I live here. I'm the owner's son." But the officers didn't listen. Their faces were hard, eyes filled with suspicion, as if his words were just noise to ignore. From the street, windows began to flicker with curious eyes. Neighbors stepped outside, whispering softly to each other, unsure what was happening. A few gathered quietly on their porches, watching the scene unfold. The tension in the air thickened, heavy and uncomfortable. Jason's heart pounded harder now, but he forced himself to breathe deeply. He repeated, louder this time, "I live here. I'm Jason Turner, the owner's son." Still the officers only tightened their grip, pushing him toward the squad car. His mind flashed back to his military training, where he had learned to control his emotions even in the hardest moments. "Stay calm, don't escalate. Keep your head clear." But inside, anger was rising like a storm. How could they not see him for who he was? The uniform he wore wasn't just cloth, it was a symbol of his service, his sacrifice. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal, like a stranger breaking into a home. His thoughts drifted to his parents, his mom's gentle smile, his dad's quiet strength. He had promised to make them proud, but now, pride felt mixed with hurt and disbelief. One of the officers spoke sharply. "Stop yelling, we're just doing our job." But what job was this, arresting a son in his own home? The unfairness of it all made Jason's chest tighten. He tried to explain again, but the officer's eyes told a different story, one of doubt, suspicion and judgment based on a uniform they didn't understand. The crowd grew, silence growing louder, with every passing second. Whispers of confusion and worry floated through the cool night air. Some neighbors looked shocked, others confused, and a few shook their heads sadly. Jason's hands trembled inside the cuffs, helplessness gnawed at him. He was trained to protect others, but right now, he couldn't protect himself. With every step toward the police car, the feeling deepened, that sometimes no matter how much you try to prove yourself, people see only what they want to see. His anger simmered beneath the surface, but he knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Suddenly a woman's voice pierced the night, loud and urgent. "That's my son. He lives here." Jason's mother came rushing out of the house, her face pale but fierce with worry. She pushed through the small crowd of neighbors and stepped between Jason and the officers. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said, her voice trembling, "but this is my son. He's been away serving in the military. He's coming home." Jason's heart leapt with relief, but the officers only exchanged quick glances, their expressions unreadable. They didn't apologize or back down right away. Instead, one officer asked for proof. Jason's father appeared at the door, holding out a small wallet. He handed it to Jason, who quickly pulled out his military ID. "This is him," Jason said quietly, but firmly. "I'm Jason Turner, this is my ID, and that's my house." The officers examined the ID, then glanced at the house behind them. The truth was clear, they had made a mistake. Some officers shifted uncomfortably, their faces showing embarrassment, but others stayed cold, refusing to meet Jason's eyes. No words of apology came from their lips. Jason felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was mixed with something harder, a deep burning anger. He had worn this uniform with pride, he had trained for months, ready to protect others. Yet here, in his own neighborhood, he was treated like a criminal. The uniform that should have earned respect, had instead brought suspicion. The man who served the country was now standing handcuffed on his own porch. His mother wrapped her arm around him, steady and strong, but Jason could see the hurt in her eyes too. The neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others offering quiet apologies. Jason's pride and frustration battled inside him. He wanted to stand tall, to show that he was more than a misunderstanding, but the sting of being wrongly accused still burned bright. The night had taken an unexpected turn, showing him how easily trust can break, even in places you call home. And sometimes, even heroes are seen as strangers. After the tense moments on the porch, Jason's family gathered with the police officers, to talk quietly and calmly. His mother spoke softly but firmly, explaining who Jason was, and how long he had been away serving the country. His father showed paperwork that proved the family owned the house. The officers listened, some nodding in understanding, others still cautious. There was no loud apology, but the atmosphere softened. The officers agreed to remove the handcuffs, and Jason took a deep breath, finally feeling some relief. As the crowd began to disperse, Jason stood with his parents, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. He thought about how quickly people had judged him, not as a soldier or a son, but as a stranger breaking in. It was a painful reminder of how easily appearances can fool people. His uniform, meant to symbolize honor and protection, had made him a target instead of a hero. In that moment, Jason felt invisible, as if his service and sacrifices didn't matter to those who should have known better. Looking around, he saw the mixed reactions from the neighbors. Some came forward with kind words, expressing their support and sympathy. Others stayed back, eyes filled with doubt or confusion. It was clear that trust was fragile here, broken by one night's misunderstanding. Jason's mind wandered to what it truly meant to serve and protect. He realized that while he was trained to defend others, he hadn't been prepared to face suspicion from his own community. He thought about the lessons he'd learned, that being a soldier wasn't just about strength and discipline, but about patience and hope. Despite the hurt and confusion, Jason felt a quiet strength growing inside him. His family stood close, united and strong, reminding him that he was not alone. He knew this experience would not define him. Instead, it was a call for something greater, for people to listen more carefully, to see beyond the surface, and to understand each other better. Jason looked up at the stars above, feeling a small spark of hope. Maybe someday soon, the world would learn to look with clearer eyes, to respect without judgment, and to welcome home every soldier, not as a stranger, but as a hero. And until that day, he would stand tall, proud of who he was, ready for whatever came next. This story shows us how appearances can be very deceiving. Just because someone looks different, or doesn't fit what we expect, doesn't mean they don't belong. Jason wore a uniform that represented honor and service, yet he was mistaken for a stranger, and treated unfairly. It reminds us how important it is to listen carefully, and to respect others before making quick judgments. Sometimes, a simple moment of understanding can change everything. We all make assumptions, it's human, but what if we stopped and asked questions instead? What if we took the time to see the person behind the uniform, behind the face? How can we change the way we see others, so stories like Jason's don't happen again? In a world that often rushes to judgment, empathy and awareness are more important than ever. When we open our hearts and minds, we help build a community where everyone feels safe, seen, and respected, especially those who sacrifice so much to protect us all. So next time you see someone who looks different, remember Jason's story, and ask yourself, am I really seeing who they are?